All right, everybody. Welcome to our Sharity webinar series. We are very excited to have everybody here with us today. We know that there are a lot of people that are going to be checking out the recording. And again, I will keep an eye on people as they join in. Before I get to introducing our guests and our topic today, I will first introduce myself. My name is Ann Miskey, and I am stepping in today for the amazing and wonderful Carol Wick, who had something come up, very positive, but something she had to be at. And so she asked me to step in. So all errors and omissions are mine, not Carol's, but I am truly honored to be here today. So before we jump into our webinar, I would like to share a little bit about Sharity and who we are, the hosts of this webinar series, the Insights for Impact, which is a 3-part series. Today is the first, and will be followed by 2 other very interesting webinars in the coming months. But who is Sharity? Let me see. I'm admitting while I'm talking here. So Sharity is an organization that really works to help and support, build the impact and the sustainability of nonprofit organizations. Those of us who work with Sharity ourselves come from long backgrounds in the not-for-profit world. I've been a CEO and an ED of nonprofits, direct service, as well as having worked in the foundation world. And others of my colleagues, Carol, et cetera, have very deep knowledge and experience in this world. So really, it's how do we help organizations build their mission, scale their organization, and really, again, entice investors to invest in the work and the cause that they're focusing on. Where we work? Well, I think other than Antarctica, Sharity has covered every continent. So even though working in very different parts of the world, many of the issues that people deal with are very similar, and the barriers as well as some of the opportunities. So we've done a lot of work overseas as well as in this country. So what are some of the services? Well, for any nonprofit who's launched a campaign, you know how much fun that is and how much work it is. So really, Sharity can be there to help you set up everything to get ready for the campaign, to make sure you're in a really, really good place before you launch that campaign. Helping evaluate and identify donors. We all need more donors, and we need donors that love the cause, love the organization, and are there for the long haul. Impact and return on investment. Impact is a word we hear a lot in the sector, but really need to make sure that the impact is real. And so Sharity can help you both develop and articulate those tangible outcomes. We're all really good storytellers, but it has to go beyond the story to the true impact, the data, the evidence, etc. Fundraising, everybody's most fun thing in the not-for-profit world. We all love to fundraise. But again, if you want to increase your impact, increase your fundraising, increase your resources, Sharity has very, very deep knowledge in how to do this and how to do this successfully. We talked about that lovely campaign. Starting it is hard. Having it continue and lead it is also very time consuming for an organization. So where experts can come in and really help you manage that campaign and create the biggest return on investment for your campaign. And then finally, communication and research. And this can be very broad in the work that we do around strategic planning, around researching with various stakeholder groups, looking at developing resources, proposals, communications, social media campaigns, all of those things. So Sharity will be there for you. Again, lots of experience, knowledge, have done this all over the world very successfully and really helped lift organizations to the next level. I mentioned that today is the launch of our webinar series, session 2. Please mark it on your calendar, October the 23rd at 3 p.m. EST. For those of us sitting on the West Coast, that's noon, and then anything in between. Our next webinar, Access for Everyone, Reimagining Services for Survivors. So survivors of domestic and interpersonal violence, and really relooking at the system to have an even stronger and better impact on those that we serve. So mark that on your calendars. For further details, and I'll put this up at the end again, please contact Carol Wick. And if you want to jot down any of the information, it'll also be in the recording if you're interested in finding out more about Sharity. So thank you all very much. I'm going to take that down and go back to our webinar today. So as I mentioned, today's webinar is called Engaging All Voices in Your Planning. This webinar will explore why participatory processes, those that intentionally engage all stakeholders in decision-making and planning, are critically important for nonprofits. We need to understand that all voices coming from all perspectives, experiences, walks of life is vital. We want to look I'm also admitting as I'm talking here. We want to be able to speak to those who access the services of the organization, people who have lived experience of whatever the issue is that you're dealing with, partners, board members, donors, staff, volunteers, and of course, the broader community members. All of these people need to be engaged, share their experience, their insights, their ideas, and I would add one important piece, add their perceptions, because we all know that perception equals reality. And sometimes you don't realize how people view either the organization, the work you're doing, or the cause that you are trying to work with. So that's really, really important to understand that and to hear from those people. So today, our esteemed panelists are going to provide an overview of how to maximize stakeholder participation in planning and program design. So let me get to our amazing panelists today. And in no order, let me introduce our first panelist today is Inderjit or Vicky Kaur Basra. She is Doctor of Social Work, and she is driven by belief. I love this. This was her statement, a belief in the power of community and the importance of creating systems that are equitable, just, and responsive to the needs of all individuals. Her work is guided by the principle that every girl and young woman deserves the opportunity to thrive free from violence, discrimination, and systemic barriers. That's a really powerful statement, and I look forward to hearing more from Dr. Basra, or it's okay, I'll call you Vicky. Presently, Vicky serves as the president and CEO of the Dolores Barr Weaver Policy Center in Jacksonville, Florida, where she's at the forefront of advancing girls-centered, trauma-informed care and advocacy for girls in the juvenile justice and child welfare systems through innovative policy and practice reform. So, Vicky, welcome to our webinar today.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Our next guest is Jessica Raymond. Jessica is a tenured nonprofit strategist. I love that. With a heart for people and service to others. Her work within the nonprofit sector focuses on systems-level change, community building, equity, and justice. Jessica's leadership of multi-million-dollar federal grants, capacity building with nonprofits across the country, and deep strategic engagement in national nonprofit strategy are areas where she truly finds her joy in the sector. And I love that, because so often we think of the sector as being a really tough one. So important to find that joy. She's a graduate of the University of Florida with highest honors in the Crummer Graduate School of Business with honors. She received the Martin Bell Scholarship and the 2023 Executive Leadership Award for outstanding contributions in leadership, learning support, and goodwill. Certified in nonprofit board governance and leadership, Jessica draws inspiration from her Surinamese and Grenadian heritage. So welcome, Jessica. It's wonderful to have you. So now that we've gotten all the intros done, let's jump right into the important topic today. When we talk about engaging voices, all voices, what does that mean to you? And Vicky, I'm going to start with you on this one. What does that mean to you?
So I think historically, we look at the world from this kind of deserving versus undeserving, or expert versus non-expert. And I think, as leaders in any form of work, our vision and our goal is, what can we do to be relevant? What can we do to have impact? And what can we do to be purposeful in our work? And so for me, including all the voices really is connected to the highest ability to achieve what our vision is, has to include all forms of experts. And that can be a direct expert or an indirect expert, right? So direct, which means the person's experiencing it every day, living it every day, or brings this direct experience to the work, versus indirect, those of us that may have gone to college, school. And it has to be that layered communication and conversation that will bring about the change. I know my colleague Jessica at one point made the statement of like, with us, not for us.
That's, I've always loved that. I think that is so true. Jessica, let me throw it over to you. What does this mean to you?
I completely agree with what Vicky shared. I think what's important when you're talking about engaging all voices is considering who's standing at the metaphorical back of the room. Who is furthest away from the power seat, from where the decisions are being made? And how do we intentionally and not assume accidentally that their voices, their lived experiences, their wisdom will find their way to the decision-making table? And when we talk about advocating for people in terms of engaging their voices, to me, it's not a matter of, let me repeat what I heard in a space away from a decision-making authority or the ability to actually affect change. Here is the mic. Here is the mic. You sit at this table. You tell me what you need from us. You make the decision. You are the driver in this seat. And so I think when we talk about empowering all voices and making sure we've engaged everyone, sometimes that's missed. Sometimes we think, well, whoever is at the table, this is all we need. This is who we need. These are the voices we need. And when we're not intentional, because systems create this table, systems create a singular table, and sometimes a singular table with very few seats. And so if we are effective equity and justice practitioners, we understand that the table is a creation of a system who is designed to exclude voices. And so we, as the folks who perhaps may find ourselves at that table, we have the ability to go and reach for others and to extend and perhaps give up our seat at that table for a person who has the wisdom and lived experience to do the job that needs to be done. So that's the full range of how far engaging all voices can go for me, and how I would encourage others in the nonprofit sector to consider it.
Thank you. Both of you, I think you really hit the nail on the head there. And this is something we've heard more and more about in the not-for-profit sector, which is a good thing the last few years. Be more inclusive, listen to people, again, especially those who are living or who have lived the experience. But we don't do a very good job. And I'm going to say that broadly, because I think we all struggle with how to do this in a way that is effective, but that is also just for the people that we're inviting to the table, that it's real and not tokenism.
Right.
And I'm going to just throw this out to either of you. Can you give some specific examples of maybe what you've done or what you've seen that is actually something that people can use and implement, and how to do this in a way that is truly going to be effective?
Vicki, I'm looking to you, my sister, because you gave such a beautiful example about the contracting process and the co-authorship of your curriculum. So I'm going to throw it to you.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think that number one, it has to be built into your policies and practices and values, right? Mm-hmm. So it becomes a way of thinking and doing the work, and your bigger purpose is centered around your belief that all voices need to be a part of the process. And so for us, what that looks like within our organization is when we are building a curriculum for girls, girls are co-authors in it. So right now we're building a curriculum, and it's actually a young person that's been direct filed, which means they were pushed into the adult system, who's sitting in lockup right now that is co-authoring this curriculum with us. We also pay our speakers. It doesn't matter what expertise you come with, whether it's direct or indirect, we are going to pay you for that. So many of us nonprofits have events where we invite those that have received services from us to speak at those events. And I think that's a form of tokenism, especially if we're deciding what they need to say to get our funders to engage in the conversation, right? Or to give money, if we're deciding what it all looks like. And so for us, we've built a speakers bureau, which it's an actual contract with those that would choose to be a part of the speaking circuit. And they are paid for it. They're paid for their time to actually write what they want to write and what they want to present. They are provided coaches, both a writing coach and a public speaking coach to help them through the process. And then once they're ready, their name goes into the Speakers Bureau. And when we have an opportunity, we send it out to everybody in the Speakers Bureau, and they get to kind of say, yeah, I'm available on this date and I would like to speak on this topic. So it's the co-authorship. It is, things like the Speakers Bureau. And then we also have those with lived experiences working with us. They are many times the people that are responding directly to those that we're serving. Girls have always said, they're like, Miss Vicki, I don't want to talk to you. Like, I don't want to talk to you. I want to talk to someone who gets it. And what that means is someone who's had the lived experiences. And so part of how we make sure that we are holding ourselves accountable is that we have team members that have had the lived experiences of those that we serve who are central to our work as well. And so it's like, how do we build in this core value at every aspect and point of our work?
You know, you said a couple of things that I think I got goosebumps because I appreciate so much. I think when you started saying about put it in your policies, again, make it part of your organization, that this is, how you will do everything. I know just from my personal experience, the last organization I was with, we created a leadership advisory of people with lived experience. And we offered the support. You talked about the speaking, how to run. It basically became its own board. And what we ended up doing was that they would decide who their chair, who their officers were. But the chair of the organization became a board member on the larger board. Mm-hmm. So there was direct representation. And then we started to establish ways of working that we would do no communication or marketing or initiative without going to this group and running everything through them to say, does this resonate? Is this right? Are we doing this the right way? Are we saying this the right way? The other place we brought them in, and you mentioned this, Vicki, is working with clients. Because to have somebody who's been there and done that is so impactful. So I think that you can really incorporate these things into your organization, and also compensation. That is justice. The only thing I would warn people about is labor laws. And also, if anybody is on public benefits, they have to watch their income level. If they go over that income level, it can mess with their benefits. So you have to work with them to make sure that it's all being done the right way, not to harm them, and to make sure you're abiding by all labor employment laws. Jessica, do you have... Sorry, go ahead.
And I was going to add one more thing. I'm sorry. And I think the other piece to this is it has to be a core way of how you engage with those that you serve. Mm-hmm. So it starts really there, right? If we don't see those that we're serving as equal partners in the work, if we don't see those that we're serving as experts of their own lived experiences, if we don't see the reality of mutuality within the relationship, that both people in a growth fostering relationship, both people are growing in the relationship. So me as the care manager or the clinician is growing equal to the person that I'm serving. And that's that healthy mutual relationship. And when we don't see our clients as more than just that moment in their lives, as this fuller story of who they are, then it's not going to built into the other components. So if we're seeing clients as deserving or undeserving, or the fact that we need to go in and, fix this, or we go back to the old models of, service work, which was really around we're doing for others. So those with privilege do for others to, support those that have less privilege. If we don't shift that whole mindset, even when we build these policies and values within our organizations, it's going to result in tokenism.
So important. I remember having these conversations where we would look at our marketing materials, and it was always about how our agency has done amazing work and look at the life we've saved. And we completely, in talking with our lived experience advisors, basically said, we're not saviors. It's their journey. It's their lives. It's their choices, their resilience. I always say we are in the privileged place of walking beside people on their journey, and where we can, I tell my staff, we're barrier busters and hoop jumpers for people. We're not saviors. And so I think that that's such an important piece of it, building that respect. Can you talk a little, and I'll just throw this at both of you, the issue of trauma? Because when you are working with people, and this is true at the staff level or with people that you're serving, you have people who have experienced traumatic things in their lives. And so when you're asking people to come on board, give us your thoughts, your voice, take a leadership role, how do you also then work with people who you don't want to be re-traumatizing and re-triggering? Any thoughts on
definitely have many thoughts here working with people living with HIV, and definitely folks who were around in the 80s when there was a lot of fear, a lot of open discrimination, and mischaracterization and harm caused by our federal government. And so being able to work alongside those folks in combination with people who were newly diagnosed with HIV, and wanting to activate the voices of folks who live in both experiences. I've been living with this. I've lost friends to this. I've lost lovers. I've lost family members versus, a mother that I recall working with who found out that she had HIV and called me and asked if it was okay for her to do her laundry with her children because she was afraid it would be transmitted that way. And so when we talk about an awareness and an acute awareness of how through in an attempt to empower, we can re-traumatize, what was important for us first was making sure that we were leveling with their humanity before engaging them in that way. Do you have what you need? Do you feel dignified in how we are treating you as part of this system? Do you have what you need? Are you in a place to want to share your story? Because some folks do not, absolutely do not. And I think the harm that can be caused is encouraging anyway, poking and prodding anyway, which is a re-traumatization in itself, finding the words to explain something that happened to you that was so unpleasant, potentially life-altering, and has fundamentally changed you as a person, and feeling like that story is now being broadcast to be used to encourage funders to do the right thing, to encourage peers to do the right thing. And so I felt very strongly about that and making sure that my team and our organization are really sensitive. And so in the ways we were able to demonstrate a regard for the trauma, and also to make sure that the voice was not lost in shaping the care system, we used our planning council to do that. And we would encourage folks who are in a position to do so to join our planning council. I couldn't implement a budget without their approval. I had to go back to them on a monthly basis and say, hey, here's how we did this past month. Here's how many new cases we saw. Here's where we are in the budget. Do you all agree with our collective approach as a team? What am I missing? And part of, and I wanted to say this earlier, we were talking about embedding justice and equity into your systems. I know that it works because we did it. We did it with our HIV work through the guidance of HRSA, and requiring people living with HIV in a certain percentage of our planning council being a person living with HIV, so that we were never in a situation where we were ignoring the lived experiences of people who were going to be on the receiving end of the services that we provide. So all in all, I would encourage, as we're looking to engage voices and also trying to demonstrate a trauma-informed approach in how we engage clients, that we think about their readiness and be clear about the true objective and purpose of how and when we engage their voices, and to respond with the same kindness if they choose not to share their story, if they choose not to engage in this way. There is as much dignity and honor in that.
Thank you. Thank you. Excellent. Vicki, do you have anything to add to that?
I feel like Jessica did an amazing job answering it. So.
Wonderful. It's just a couple things that we did, and this was actually feedback from the people we were working with, who said, don't keep asking us to tell our story and ask us for our expertise. And so we stopped even saying voices of lived experience, and we started talking about voices with lived expertise, your experts. So it's share your expertise with us. And oftentimes they would tell their stories.
Yep.
But it's like you're more than the story of what happened to you. And I think really talking to people about, you are an expert in this. So as an expert, how can you help us? So thank you for that. I really appreciate your words, Jessica. Very profound and very, very important for all of us working in this field to take that to heart. We talked about the compensation. We talked a little bit about the staff. Now let's talk about expanding that voices. I think the voice of lived, I'll say, expertise is absolutely vital. That can change and have a huge impact in a positive way on people's lives. But there are other voices we also want to include. And we often don't, right? It's staff, it's board, we sit there, we figure it all out, we do the budget, here we go. But what about engaging our donors? Not just in asking them for money, but in asking them to help us plan. And what can that do for us? How can that benefit us? Any one of you want to take that? I just threw that out at you.
I have my thoughts, but I'm sensitive to, I spoke on the last question.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead and start, and then, please.
Okay. So in terms of engaging donors, this is also an area I feel really strongly about, because when we talk about equity and justice, we can't have that conversation without also talking about power. And the power seat, for sure, in the nonprofit model is in the funder seat. And sometimes, and I know I'm amongst friends on this call in the nonprofit sector, we can contort ourselves to suit a funding agenda instead of what our community actually needs from us, what our constituents actually need. And so in terms of engaging a donor in the conversation, I think the type of donor you're courting is really important. Are they open to a systems level change? Or are we talking about, hey, can you buy 10,000 backpacks with this money we gave you? Or, can you get us 10,000 cans of food and just report it as, outputs of a service? There's been a shift in the funding structure that I've been really heartened to see, which is a call for collaboration and a call beyond outputs into outcomes. The so what? You provided this service. How did this improve the situation that you wrote to us about, that you asked me to participate in? And it's been my experience that donors whose hearts are close to the issue, because donating is it's an emotional experience, to be able to do that as an individual donor. And then if we're talking about a corporate partner or a foundation partner, are we aligned on the systems level change? Of course, there's the day-to-day service. Are we also aligned on the systems level change that needs to happen so that this day-to-day service can be a little less frequent? It's not needed because we did the systems level change. And I have found that donors who are not aligned with me or my teams that I've worked with over the years, we've just not been able to hit it. And that's fine. I will go to another donor with that ask and find where I can get that support, because the ask is not changing. The need is the same. The ask is the same. And so when we talk about having them in a conversation with us and making sure their voice is in it, I think when the donor initiates the conversation with us first, sometimes we end up off track. But when we can bring the conversation to them and engage them early, I think there's a lot more opportunity for collaboration and to create a tighter alignment between what's actually needed and the funding that's needed to push that forward.
Absolutely. 100%. Vicky, any additional words? I don't want to put you on the spot, but
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you, Jessica. I think just to kind of jump off from what Jessica has already shared is, when I think of a lot of the progressive funders out there, what I have started seeing is that they're inviting the organizations that they're funding to the table to have conversations. They have not taken it that additional step forward to take those that are in the community, those that are directly impacted by decisions to the table yet. And I think so for me, a lot of the conversation with donors on top of everything that kind of Jessica shared is how do we get them to move to a space where they're not seeing us as the experts, right? But they are seeing the community members as the experts. And then it's almost like we're brought in secondary when funders are deciding, hey, this is what we want to focus on for the next 3 years. Those are should be based off of conversations with community members and community partners and experts in the community. And then from there, we kind of can share, hey, this is the work we've been doing or not doing. And so it is so important for funders to be a part of that conversation, to understand the importance of expert voices and all voices at the table. I'm in in North Florida, and there's a big divide of like the Black and white communities. And that middle community is not seen or heard. And so we're starting to see grant opportunities popping up for Black and brown communities, for LGBT communities. But I feel like, a part of the work that we haven't stepped up in our community is the immigrant voice, or, the voice of South Asians, all of that. And so to me, again, we're not going to build programs for those that need them unless we have space for them at the table to be able to say, this is happening in our community. This is what's missing for us.
One of the things that I discovered in my work is how we have often donors, good people, want to make a difference, but they don't really understand in a deep level the issues you're dealing with or even the work that you're doing. So one of the things we did was we embarked on sort of an education process, and I don't mean in any way to disparage or be patronizing a lot of smart people out there, but I worked in homelessness, and if there is ever an area that is filled with myths and misperceptions and, discrimination and systems that, don't function, it's the homelessness sector. And we recognized that we had people who were charitable, and we wanted to take that to justice level of support for the organization and truly understanding and providing opportunities for our donors and community members and elected officials to dive deeply into it. And again, the voices of lived expertise, of experience. And I'll just give one quick example of something that was quite transformative. And it was just a little thing. We took a number of our donors on a journey. We didn't say it was a tour. We didn't put people on show. It was all developed working with our client base, with people with lived experience. And we went to different sites and we talked to people. Well, we stopped for lunch at our interim housing, our shelter. And a lot of our donors had volunteered. We have a program where you can come and cook and serve meals. And so they're all like, oh, great. Are we going to be serving lunch? And I was like, no, you're going to be sitting at the table eating with the people in the shelter. Staff is serving lunch. We had more feedback from our donors over that experience where they said, one lady was laughing and she and this other lady got along and they're just laughing and having a great time. And another gentleman came up and said, oh, I met Joe. He and I are both interested in XYZ, and we were talking about it. And people kept saying they're just like us. And that was such a profound moment. So the little things that you can do to connect your donors in real ways to people. So yes, thank you for that. I think including our donors, including our elected officials, is another and very, very important. So they see the difference they can make through policy and see how some of the policies that sound so good on paper have unintended consequences. So how do we bring the community to us? And again, to us being that broad staff lived experience, the people we're serving. So we talked a lot about that. There was something, Jessica, that I think you had a conversation about, and it was intent versus impact, which I thought was really, really intriguing because I think this often describes the not-for-profit world. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean by that and how that relates to what we're talking about today?
Absolutely. I say this in love and compassion for my colleagues in the nonprofit sector. Oh boy, can we mean well and do so much harm. Oh, good grief. And sometimes not even being fully cognizant of that harm until many years later or not ever. And so sometimes it's difficult to accept that with all the hard work, the late nights, the evenings, the events, the galas, was none of it worth doing because the impact of what we set out to do wasn't what we thought. And so there's an ego part of it that we've got to unpack as people who set out to do good things and sometimes can cause harm in the process. And so that's the intent piece. I intended to do a thing. What was the actual impact of what I did? And I think sometimes we're afraid to ask that question. What was the actual impact of what I did? My intent was so great that maybe we can just sit in that truth. I meant well. I meant well, and I did what I thought was right, but you never went to the other side of this conversation, which was what was the impact of what I actually did? And so you can't consider one without the other. I do think that perhaps I hold a slightly unpopular perspective because some people say, well, only your impact matters. Your intent doesn't matter whatsoever. I think it matters for something. Did you mean to harm me and then you harmed me? Or did you not mean to harm me and then you harmed me? One certainly feels worse than the other, but harm happens irrespective of what the intent was. And so I think it's really important for us to be clear about that. And it's on the cusp of the entire conversation we're having about engaging all voices and our duty to not cause harm in the support we're doing with walking alongside our clients and our constituents. Are we clear on what the impact is going to be? Because they can help us understand that. I have been in that unpopular seat a couple of times and had to, share with some really powerful people in a very public forum that the plan they were outlining for the state of Florida was going to cause serious harm. And I was so grateful that my colleagues in the room gave me a round of applause, but I thought, I'm glad that we're all thinking this. We know this. But I hope I'm not the only one that would have said something in this space, that if I were not here by some random act, I ended up in a different field of work, that there would have been someone else who would have said, this is going to cause a lot of harm. And this is why I'm a huge, I love to listen to Lovey. If you've not listened to her TED Talk on being a professional troublemaker and getting in good trouble, she says that people who tell the truth, it's not that they're not afraid. They're afraid and they do it anyway because it's about what's right. And so that's the core essence of intent versus impact to me, is being emotionally intelligent, engaged, and grounded in your humanity enough to understand that even with the best intentions, you can do harm.
Yeah. And again, to your point, this is where all voices really matter, because you need to be able to speak truth to you. And that's as a nonprofit leader working in this field, to be able to create a safe space where people, especially those who are directly affected, feel that they have not just the safety, but the opportunity to come forward and say, right, that actually didn't work. That actually is harmful. That may be uncomfortable. And for staff too, right? You have to create that. And sometimes, I think sometimes it's just, we're all so busy, right? We're also just running 100 miles an hour. Vicki, I want to get back a little bit to your work specifically. And you talked about the young women that you work with. Can you share with us some specifics around the work and what you have seen because of the approach you've taken? What has that meant for the young women that you're working with?
Absolutely. I think the biggest impact we've seen is definitely the work that we're doing with survivors and victims of human trafficking. What we're seeing and what our data is showing that when the first responder is a survivor mentor, which is what they're called within our system, and it's someone with the lived expertise, the individual is more likely to engage in services and stay in services. They are more likely to seek support and help when their point of contact is a survivor mentor. And their concepts around hope look very different because they're sitting across from somebody that was at some point in the same space they were in. And now this person may live in their own home and own a home and, do have professional roles and positions. And so I think there's this, core space of hope that shows up. And I think it's that hope that really keeps these young people engaged in our services. When things start going awry, they are going to contact their survivor mentor. We know that on average, victims of human trafficking may return to their trafficker up to 7 times, right? And for them, their survivor mentors become a beacon of hope and are usually the people they're reaching out to and having conversations with. And it's our job at that point to ensure that the survivor mentors have everything they need to be successful in their roles, right? So the other piece of this is how are we building internal infrastructures to support those that are now, the frontline service providers. Another place is our curriculum, and a lot of the components of our work that we've created have been informed by the young people we're serving. And so even our theoretical perspectives, our lenses are all based on what girls have told us. We have the Bill of Rights that was created by girls. We also have girl-centered principles that were created by girls. They're, a lot of them share, see me more than this moment, see me more than my behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Take the time to ask me what's happening. And so when you sit and you just listen, you learn so much on how you can be successful in the work. If you're not listening and you go in with kind of this mindset of like, I'm the expert, you're missing out on really understanding how to support the individual. And, in the social work world, we talk a lot about client-centered, right? And client informed, but we never process through what does client-centered even mean? It means the client is the expert. It means, again, that both of you are coming from this lens of learning because you may bring an expertise, but they also bring an expertise, right? And it means that they get to lead the process. And sometimes that's not possible, especially when you're working with juveniles. But to me, at that point, we should still be having informed conversations. We should be sharing all of the information. We should be sharing, what's going to happen next. And for us, I see that a lot of times in court, when we can prepare girls ahead of time before they are in court of what's going to happen in the courtroom, they have less kind of what people define as outbursts. I call them righteous outbursts, but they have less so-called outbursts because they know what's going to be expected of them in that space. They know what's, how the interaction is going to happen. And so I think informing them and engaging them is so important because it really does impact every part of the work.
And can you speak briefly about the impact on the survivor mentor in this program?
Yeah, it is a powerful impact because they become advocates beyond just the direct service. So many of our survivor mentors have been to Washington, D.C. and, participated in, supporting laws in Washington, D.C. Many of them have traveled to Tallahassee here in Florida to help advocate. And so they're not just advocates at the direct service level. Many of them really, really become advocates at a much higher level, impacting both policy change as well as process change. The other side of it is making sure that, we have the infrastructure to support them. because they are going to get tricked. They are going to have moments where the work of the person they're working with can be too close to their own experiences. We've had survivor mentors that have seen their traffickers in the community. And so our internal infrastructure has to be one where it's safe to be able to come back and speak, that it's safe to be able to say, hey, I need extra support. And we have partnerships in the community that provide free therapeutic services to our survivor mentors. And so, and even as a supervisor, knowing how to have the conversations, knowing when to ask, hey, let me check in. Was this your response or was it the client's response? What made you think the client felt that way? And so even that supervision piece looks kind of a little different. And it's powerful. It's an incredible model and it's powerful. And it's created the most amount of change in our community.
So you see sort of the staff in your organization as being kind of the ones who are supportive, but the leadership is actually taken by your mentors and by your clients. So you're there to kind of help and support that and lift that up.
Yeah.
But not be the direct. I love that. Jessica, can you talk a little bit again about your experience specifically? And I think the Ryan White funding that you have and how you, through that, you were able to engage the voices of families and clients in that work.
Yeah, I always, when I look back at where I started in my career, coming fresh out of college, grateful that my first experience was with Ryan White and HRSA funding, because it was built systemically that you could not avoid including the voices of people living with HIV. It was required. They were required to have a certain number of seats on the council that would shape the care system, that would approve the funding for the year. So it wasn't, my position as an administrator going to the community and saying, hey, I'm Jessica, I've got all the great ideas. Here's the budget I built. Anyway, see you next year. No, it was, here's what I think based on what I've gleaned from you in the building of relationship and what I'm seeing in the data. We would get a huge zip file from the state epidemiological department that we would have to digest for our planning council. This is an all-day event specifically to evaluate our care system and to set our budget for the next fiscal year. And so just considering all of the different ways in which HRSA over the years has built in to the system, the care system for Ryan White administrators, you've got to include the voices of people living with HIV. We've got to see that on your planning council. Your effectiveness as an administrator is also assessed. There was an assessment of the administrative mechanism that was required to be submitted to HRSA. And so those experiences with the Ryan White program made me believe, and was just a part of my core identity as well, and how I grew up, that there's no doing this for. It's always with. It is always with. It is power with, not power over. And so in my experiences with the Ryan White program, my constituents, they knew who I was. They had my direct line. Thousands of people across a 5-county area, they had my number. They had the number of my team members. They could call us if they were having a difficult moment, if they didn't understand something, if they were upset with me about something. Those were the phone calls I really looked forward to. Like, please hold me accountable. What didn't I do? What didn't I say? What didn't I understand about what your lived experience is and how you're receiving service? And sometimes it was a, hey, Jessica, you need to get down to the food bank because this and this and this is happening, or you guys are out of milk again. And just having those conversations and knowing that by an intentional approach, we are decreasing the distance between the folks who deliver the service and the folks who receive the service, was something that really just resonated with me, and is why I dedicated so much of my early career to that work and carry those philosophies with me. Because in my mind, I'm like, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you ask the people with the lived experience to tell you how to shape a care system? And so it's everything from HRSA encouraging what they call popular opinion leaders. This is through the CDC, using influential people in your community to encourage people to get care, all the way over to lowering barriers of entry into your system and using pharmacies, case managers, everywhere where somebody could enter the system, making sure that we were ready to receive them. So those are just some highlights that I think perhaps on the surface were not designed with equity and justice in mind. It was designed with accessibility in mind and bringing down the number of new cases of HIV across the country, which it has. But in my mind, I see early tenets of equity and justice that are really important to reflect elsewhere in the sector.
Thank you. And you said something, and I'd like you to repeat it. The power, say that again, with us? Was it the power?
Oh, power with us, not power over, power with.
With us, not power over us. I think that is, if there's anything I want to remember, that it's that phrase today. So thank you. I see that our time is getting near the end. I want to leave a little bit of time if there are any questions. So I would like to ask each of you to talk for a couple of minutes about, you're talking to nonprofits. What are some things you would recommend for them if they really want to start down this path? So Vicki, let me go to you first, and then I'll come back to you, Jessica.
So I think one, make sure this becomes a part of your core value and the values of your organization. I think educating leadership, board members, team members, so you have buy-in early on, right? And that you don't have team members that feel like, well, I have a degree, so my voice matters more at the table. So really looking at what are, the microaggressions, what are the biases that we each are bringing to the table, which we all have, right? Before we kind of do it. And then making sure that those with lived expertise are at the table every step of the way so that you're co-creating with someone that has the lived expertise.
Great. Thank you. And again, that's with us, the co-creating, right? That theme I think is run through today. It's together with us, not over us, not under us. Jessica, final thoughts from you about what can nonprofits do?
I would say if you're looking to start down this path, the first thing you want to assess is how far you are away from really centering equity and justice in how you deliver services. And once you truly understand that distance, and you can't assess that distance on your own, this is something, building on what Vicki shared, this is something where you want to bring your clients and your consumers and your constituents along with you every step of the way, because they're going to tell you the truth about how your system is functioning, because they're on the receiving end of what it is you've set into place. And so I think that's your first step. Assess where you are, and then assess your capacity and your knowledge and your biases, as Vicki said, and being able to narrow that distance. There's no system that's fully just, that's fully equitable, that's just perfect and ready to go, but it's always a process of endeavoring to be better, to be closer to an equitable system, to center justice in everything we're doing. And so I really would say, in one word, just start. If you haven't started already, just start. It can be done. And if you're looking for your first step, assess how far you are from your target and bring in the people who are going to be on that journey with you to make that initial assessment.
That's great. Just do it. Just do it. And are there going to be stumbles and falls and oops?
Absolutely. And you're going to be frustrated and tired, and it was easier to not do it this way.
But the benefits far outweigh all of that. And after a while, I think both of you have, it becomes part of who you are.
Yes.
It just is part of the way you operate. And once it gets to that point, it's truly transformative for an organization. It's transformative for your donors, for your community members. It just creates this incredible forward-moving, impactful organization because it is responsive in real ways to what people are experiencing on a day-to-day basis. So I thank you both for your incredible wisdom and experience and expertise today. We have a few minutes left. If anybody has any questions, if you want to write in the chat, or if you want to just put up your hand and speak, that's fine too. I appreciate all of you being here today and listening. Do we have any questions?
And we've got one hand up from Kay Sheffield.
Okay, so There we go. Keisha, can you go ahead and ask your question?
So I have a question. How do you curb in, or like if you have someone who's supposed to be the facilitator, but everything, so just making the group, everything go together, but they put so much influence and pressure on everyone at the table that it's all led by the facilitator, and then like no one else has a voice, or they also, I don't know how to explain it, but like they basically take over, and so everything's directed on what they want to do, and not like not the group. Like, let's just say, so one of the things that we do in our organization is we do community sick care process. So instead of sticking with that, they're like, well, that's just a process, and we're we're still 501c3, but it's like, that's a process. That's not what we're supposed to be doing. So we've kind of, because of, and it's almost like bullying, but because the person is facilitating everything, putting the direction, and has the money, they have the purse, the purse. And we only move forward if it's their ideas and their stuff. So I'm sure I'm probably confusing and all over the place, but I mean, how do you deal with that and trying to rope them in back to the ultimate goal of, helping the community?
Well, would either of you like to take that? Or
I could share kind of my top kind of thoughts, and appreciate, Jessica, you jumping in.
Yes, absolutely.
So to me, this is where it's what are the values? So if it's a group that's meeting, what are the core values that they have put together, and have we taken time to put those core values together? And I think that having peers of that person be able to have the conversation with them, so allies that that are kind of your allies, but are their peers who can have those conversations with them around, these are the values we created, this is the mission, this is the direction, and how you're showing up doesn't align with that. I do a training for group facilitators all the time, and I talk about the importance of starting with your values. Anytime you bring a group of people together in a room, put your values, and then use them as your go-to when people are kind of going off to different sides or veering. And so to me, it's like, it doesn't matter what kind of meeting it is, you start with the values so that you have that groundwork laid ahead of time when someone does not follow the messaging process.
I totally agree with what Vicky shared. And it sounds like this individual might have a really big personality, we'll say. And I think what's important when you're facilitating is to remember that you're a conduit to conversation. It is not necessary that you take up the most space in the conversation. And so building on what Vicky said about setting your values in spaces where, I've worked with groups, we've called it community agreements. We as a community of people coming together around a specific set of objectives, how are we going to agree to coexist together? How are we going to be together? And one of the tenets that shows up often on the community agreement is to take space and make space. So you jump into the conversation, but then you also jump out to make space for other folks. And it just goes back to the whole theme of our conversation today and engaging all voices. So I hope that that's a helpful start to have that conversation and to encourage that individual to be a conduit to conversation, to set community agreements, and then to have the entire group hold everyone equally accountable to those community agreements and those values.
Yeah, 100%. We call them norms because we would base them on our values. So all different language for the same thing is you set the parameters for the meeting and you all share in that. You all add.
Yeah.
So it's mutual agreement. This is how we're going to do this going forward. And then I know what we did at the beginning of each meeting is we would go through those every time and talk about where we were falling short and where we were doing well. So you can put it in more general terms rather than saying, would you stop taking up all the air in the room? So those are some things that we can do, but it is tough. It is tough because there are those of us who do take up a lot of oxygen. I have to watch that. Robin, yeah, Robin, you had a question.
Yes. Hi. First, thank you, Jessica, Vicky, and Anne for your insights. It's been truly very, very informing for me. But just and I'll do this quick because I know we're at the end of time, so I don't want to take up anyone else's time. But I'm a director of a child advocacy center that is a department within a division of our local government. So I'm not a nonprofit. I have a nonprofit arm of volunteers that is a completely separate organization that I'm working to try and get them somehow to be able to do more direct work with us through the county, through their volunteer. It's a whole thing. But anyway, my question is, as I begin this strategic planning process that we're getting ready to embark upon this time around, including those voices with lived experience in the Child Advocacy Center, there's a lot of confidentiality and privacy. I have non-offending caregivers and I have children. Is there one, like I said, I know we're at the end of our time, but is there one little thing that you could give me insofar as some guidance as to where to start to ask if that is something that someone would be interested in as they come through our doors? Because not everyone who comes through our doors a second time or a third time. Some are and some are not. So there's a couple challenges there.
Vicki, do you want to talk a little? Because I know you also deal with minors as well in your work.
I think so. A lot of times the initial conversation occurs between their support person within the organization and them. So they're, when they feel like, hey, this person is now ready, they will then broach it with them and share it with them. The other thing we've done is just posted like advertised in social media in the community and put some guidelines around what is it that we're looking for? How would you qualify to be a part of this committee? And you get a whole bunch of, resumes and information, and then you meet with them and kind of just, you can decide like, who is a good fit or, who really has the components that you need to be successful. But I think those are the two ways that we kind of engage team members or community members is really word of mouth and just putting it out there. And the second one is our team members then, saying, hey, I'm working with this girl who's amazing, who just is ready to, share her voice and be more involved. And a core tenet for us is advocacy is a therapeutic tool.
Boom.
Right? So we see advocacy as a core part of the therapeutic work that a young person is doing.
That is
100% agree.
One of the things that we've also looked at just quickly is that to sometimes look at people who may be one step or two steps away from whatever the trauma was they were dealing with. So they come with the experience, but they're not sort of in depth into it. And maybe they've aged out, but we would bring in adults who had been in our youth system to talk about what their experience was. We wanted the youth as well. But I think sometimes there's opportunity for people who can sort of come back. And sometimes they're coming back with a little bit of a distance view, which can also be helpful. So that's some ways of providing opportunities for people who maybe aren't in the thick of things, but hey, and you can do that through social media, advertising, and again, connections with people, I think is another opportunity.
Those are also suggestions. I was just thinking of something. Do you think it would be appropriate to have something posted like in our center that we're embarking upon this process? If you're interested in lending your voice and your expertise to this process, please reach out to. That's okay. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Wonderful.
And I would just add, Robin, as you're doing that, I think encourage the option that, folks don't have to be named and photographed in order to lend their voices to the process, because that can be a deterrent to including people. And I would say that if it's possible, because sometimes it takes a little bit for folks to trust in what it is you're doing, to use their time and energy to commit to what it is you're doing. I do think there's a value in being able to extract wisdom from stories you're hearing in aggregate. If you're hearing a pattern, as you guys are convening as caseworkers, you're hearing a pattern in barriers to entry and frustrations and ways in which people are finding themselves in difficult situations, then you can extrapolate from that data set and say, okay, here's what we're hearing, and here are some potential solutions. And then you bring those solutions to your clients when you're in conversation with them. This is what we're hearing. Would this have been of support to you when you were facing this situation?
Excellent. Excellent advice. Thank you.
And pay them for their time if you can. I mean, like every meeting I go to, I get paid for it. It doesn't matter what time of the day it is, right? Because I'm defined as an expert. And so
Right.
a big part of this work, if we're really going to shift it, is that, we are compensating.
Maybe I can get our nonprofit arm to distribute gift cards or something. That's about the only thing I think I could do as my agency.
Yeah,
But that makes the difference.
Yeah, and rightfully so.
Yeah,
Rightfully so.
technique.
Well, thank you so much. I see that our time, we've got a little bit over, but no, that's on us, not on our audience today at all. Jessica, Vicky, thank you so much again for all of your wisdom, your expertise, and really your commitment to justice, to equity, and for making a difference in the lives of the people that we serve. Thank you all for being here today. Again, this will be available on the website. And remember, Sharity, if you have any further questions, just get in touch. If you're interested in finding out more about the work that we do, we'd love to share that with you. And don't forget to put that next webinar down on your calendar, which is October the 23rd, 3 p.m. EST. So have a wonderful day, everybody. And thank you for being here with us today. We've enjoyed spending this time with you.